Gates to the Unseen. Introduction. There are senses within you that the modern world does not speak of, senses that science has never measured, yet which once ruled the destiny of civilizations. These are not the 5 fragile gates through which shadows of reality enter your mind, but ancient doors to direct perception, sealed long before history began, when the earth was still young and humanity still luminous. Without them, you are like a traveler with a map but no compass, navigating by fragments and half-truths. With them, you do not merely see the world, you see through it. You hear beyond words, feel beyond touch, know beyond thought. These faculties are your inheritance, though they now lie sleeping beneath the veil of matter. The adepts, custodians of the ancient wisdom, have spoken of them for centuries, and their traces are woven into the myths of the first races, into the hieroglyphs of vanished temples, into the chants of initiates whose voices have long since faded from the earth. This work you now hold in your ears and in your mind is grounded in the teachings of Helena P. Blavatsky, as preserved in her monumental work, The Secret Doctrine. In its pages, she unveils the story of humanity's spiritual origins, its descent into matter, the cycles of evolution, and the higher faculties that once shaped our perception. The wisdom she preserved is not an abstract philosophy for scholars to debate. It is the living map of your own being, pointing towards senses you have carried since the dawn of time. You have already felt their faint echo, in the sudden knowing of a truth before it was spoken, in the dream that later unfolded in waking life, in the unshakable feeling that someone you love was in danger, and finding it so. These are not accidents. They are ripples from the deeper perception that was once your natural state, faint but undeniable reminders that the unseen is still woven into the fabric of your life. This audiobook is an invitation to remember and to prepare. You will discover how humanity came to lose these faculties, why they remain dormant, and how, by the same laws that shape the stars, they may be reawakened. This is not a manual of curiosities, nor a catalogue of supernatural tricks. It is a journey into the laws of your own nature, into the conditions by which the sleeping gates open and the unseen becomes visible again. We will walk together from the luminous dawn of the first races to the dense twilight of the present day, into the echoes of these senses in modern life, toward the first keys of awakening, and finally to the vision of the future when the gates will stand open once more. Let each word be a key. Let each image be a doorway. And let us step together toward the gates to the unseen until the faculties that sleep within you awaken again to the light they have long awaited. More Chapter 1. The First Races and Their Open Gates. Before your world became a prison of the 5 senses, you lived in other forms. Not you as the person in your present body and name, but you as the unbroken thread of consciousness that has walked the earth through ages unrecorded. You have been more than flesh, and your perception has been far greater than the narrow circle it now traces. In this chapter, we will step into the dawn, into the first races, whose senses were not bound to bone and muscle, but roamed free through the currents of the invisible. We will glimpse how humanity's perception once embraced the seen and the unseen alike, and why those gates stood open before the long descent into matter began. The adepts speak of 7 great epochs of humanity, root races, each carrying the soul further along its path of evolution. The first races were not born from the womb. They emerged from the subtle body of the earth herself, clothed in forms of light and energy. They were without weight, without hunger, without the slow blood of mortal flesh. Their bodies were like the morning mist, visible to those of their kind, yet vanishing to the sight of denser beings. They moved by will alone, crossing vast distances without the hindrance of space. To these luminous ancestors, the idea of blindness to the currents of thought or the breath of the stars would have been unthinkable. They did not learn to perceive the unseen. They simply existed in a state where it was as tangible as your skin is to you now. What we now call mystical powers were, for the first races, as natural as breathing. There was no separation between the inner and outer worlds. To see a thought as it arose, to hear the life song of a distant mountain, to feel the approach of a being not yet in sight. These were not extraordinary events, but the simple facts of life. Their perception was whole, unbroken. Imagine living without a horizon, where your sight, hearing, and touch are not limited to the body's reach, but extend into the very fabric of existence. An elder of the first race could guide a younger one without words, shaping thought into form and form into understanding in an instant. A gathering of these beings could read the earth's needs, sensing where her breath was slow, where her currents were restless, and together harmonize with her rhythms. When the stars moved in certain patterns, their songs were felt in the marrow of their being, for their senses were attuned not to light alone, but to the vibration behind light, the hidden pulse of the cosmos. While you may no longer walk in a body of light, the remnants of those open gates still live in you. They are faint, like the ghost of a fragrance carried from another room, but they are there. And though you cannot yet command them as the first races did, you can learn to recognize their stirrings. The sudden certainty that a person is about to call you, and they do. The feeling of a place before you enter it, as though your senses arrive before your body. The way a thought takes shape in your mind that you cannot trace to your own thinking. These are the shadows of a greater light, not yet the full faculty, but the echo. The first races lived in a perpetual awareness that all life is one field of being. To them, harming another was harming oneself, for they could feel the thread that bound them to every creature and stone. This unity of perception was not a belief, but a sensory fact, as real as your heartbeat is to you now. When you think of the unseen gates, think not of powers to acquire, but of a perception to restore. This is the truth you carry forward from the first races. We stand now at the threshold of understanding the long arc from those luminous forms to the bodies we inhabit today. The gates, once open and effortless, have been closing through the ages, not as punishment, but as preparation. For in the denser world, the soul learns mastery, and only through mastery can the gates be reopened without danger. You have seen the dawn of humanity's perception, whole, unbroken, and limitless. But dawn is always followed by the rise of shadows. In our next chapter, we will walk into the era when the veil of matter began to descend, when the senses turned outward, and the inner gates began to close. Before you turn that page in your mind, ask yourself, if such perception were yours again, what would you choose to see first? Chapter 2: The Veil of Matter and the Closing of the Gates. You have seen the dawn, the luminous ages when the human being walked without weight, perceiving the world in its fullness. But dawn always gives way to day, and with the day come shadows. This chapter will take you into that turning point, when humanity's senses, once open to the currents of the unseen, began to narrow toward the physical. You will learn why the closing of the gates was not an accident, nor a theft, but a necessity in the great design of evolution, and why the faculties that sleep within you could not awaken until you were ready to bear them without falling. The passage from the first to the later races was not sudden. It unfolded like the slow dimming of a lantern, so gradual that the beings who lived through it did not at first realize what was vanishing. With each cycle, the human form became denser, heavier, and more defined. The luminous bodies of the dawn thickened into structures of flesh and bone. The senses turned outward, away from the living currents that weave all things together, and toward the solid shapes of the material plane. It was as if the world itself had drawn a veil between the seen and the unseen, and the human spirit, still luminous within, now wore that veil over its own face. Why was this descent into matter necessary? Because perception without mastery is peril. The first races could feel the thought of another as clearly as you now feel the touch of a hand. But such power, without the school of limitation, breeds chaos. The dense world, with its boundaries and resistances, became the training ground of the soul. Here, we learn to distinguish between what is and what appears to be, to discern truth not from a flood of impressions, but from choice, reflection, and will. The closing of the gates was, therefore, a protection, a preparation for a higher awakening to come. Consider the child who is given too much freedom before they have learned wisdom. What was meant for joy becomes a path to harm. In the same way, early humanity's faculties, had they been left open, would have turned the world into a theatre of untempered power. There are stories, fragments preserved in the myths of many peoples, of beings who misused the gifts of perception, bending the currents of nature to serve their will, sowing fear among the less attuned, shaping reality not for harmony, but for domination. The veil of matter descended to end such misuse, not as punishment, but as the closing of a sacred library until the student is ready to read its deeper volumes. Even now, the training of limitation is your teacher. Every obstacle you face, every moment you must rely on reason rather than instant knowing, is part of this great schooling. When frustration rises at not being able to see or know what lies ahead, remember, the closing of the gates is the reason you will one day be able to open them without falling, and you can work with a veil rather than against it. Through discipline, integrity, and refinement of thought, you strengthen the very qualities the future awakening will require. The veil is not absolute. It is more like a fabric, dense in some places, thin in others. At times it lifts momentarily, in deep meditation, in dreams, in moments of profound love or sudden danger. These are glimpses, reminders of the fuller perception your soul remembers. But the lifting is never random. It is drawn to readiness, as light enters where the shutters have been opened from within. From here, our journey moves toward the present day, the age of the fifth root race, when the gates have been closed for so long that most have forgotten they ever existed. Yet echoes remain. In our next chapter, we will follow those echoes into your own life, uncovering how the hidden senses still reach out to you, quietly, from behind the veil. The gates have closed, but they have not been destroyed. The descent into matter was the preparation for your ascent beyond it. The faculties that once shaped the dawn of mankind wait in the darkened chamber of your being, not lost, but waiting for the day they can rise again in harmony with your will. In the next chapter, we will listen for their whisper, and when you hear it, you will recognize it, for it has been speaking to you all along. Chapter 3. The Echoes in Modern Life. You may think that the closing of the gates has left you entirely severed from the world they once revealed. But the truth is more subtle, and perhaps more wondrous. The higher faculties have not perished. They have only receded, like a shoreline at low tide, leaving behind traces of their presence, little pools of memory where the deeper waters once flowed freely. These traces are the echoes, moments when the sleeping senses stir in their slumber and reach into your waking life. You have known them, though perhaps you did not recognize them for what they were. There is the sudden certainty that something is about to happen before any sign has appeared in the outer world. You think of a friend you have not spoken to in years, and an hour later their message arrives. You take an unfamiliar road, yet find yourself turning without hesitation toward the exact street you need, as if some unseen hand has drawn you there. These are not coincidences in the shallow sense, for the world is not a game of dice thrown into the void. They are ripples from the deeper perception that was once your natural state, faint but undeniable reminders that the unseen is still woven into the fabric of your life. The modern mind, trained to dismiss what it cannot measure, calls these things chance, or tricks of memory, or the work of the subconscious mind, as though naming the shadow were the same as understanding the light that casts it. Yet beneath such explanations lies a truth older than any science, a truth your own experience can confirm. You have known before you could know, seen before your eyes beheld, felt the weight of a presence when you stood alone. These are the stirrings of the higher senses, faint signals leaking through the veil, like the scent of a distant fire carried on the wind. At times, these echoes are wrapped in the strangeness of dreams. You wake with the vivid memory of a place you have never visited, only to find it in waking life months or years later. You dream of an event, and the details, small and exact, unfold in reality as if the dream were a rehearsal. Such things, to the ancients, were not aberrations, but confirmations that the soul walks in more than one world. For the gates, though mostly closed, are not sealed in all moments. Sleep loosens the grip of the physical senses, allowing the subtler faculties to wander, to listen, to see, and sometimes to bring back what they have gathered. There are also moments in waking life when the veil thins without warning. A place may hold a stillness that hums with something beyond the physical, as if it remembers more than the stones can tell. You step into an old house, and a sudden wave of feeling, joy, sorrow, unease, sweeps over you before you have even noticed the color of the walls. This is not imagination, but reception, your dormant senses touching the lingering imprint of what has passed there. The ancients knew that thought and emotion are not confined to the mind that produces them. They leave traces, subtle yet enduring, in the atmosphere of a place. And though your higher senses lie sleeping, they sometimes open an eye, so to speak, to glimpse these impressions. Perhaps you have felt the pull of someone's gaze before you saw it, the faint electric shift in the air when someone enters a room, the warmth or chill in your being when you meet a stranger's eyes. These are not merely the products of instinct, though instinct plays its part. They are the reflexes of greater faculties, still active enough to respond when the stimulus is strong. In ages past, these senses were tuned so finely that the presence of another being was as clear and precise to the inner ear as the tolling of a bell is to the outer. Even the arts that stir your soul, music, poetry, painting, carry within them the seed of the higher faculties. When a piece of music brings tears to your eyes without any story or memory to explain them, it is because the vibration has touched a part of you that remembers the harmonies of another world. When a poem seems to speak a truth you have always known but never put into words, it is because it resonates with the inner knowing that once spoke directly, without the need for language. These moments, too, are echoes, reminding you of the senses that lie beyond the physical, senses that once perceived truth and beauty as immediately as your hands now feel the sun's warmth. The danger of the modern age is not that these echoes have disappeared, but that they are ignored. We live in a time that rewards only what can be seen and measured, and so we train ourselves to dismiss the quiet signals that arrive unbidden. Yet the more you ignore them, the fainter they become, and the more you attend to them, the clearer they will grow. This is why the recognition of the echoes is the first step toward reopening the gates. You cannot awaken a faculty whose presence you deny. The ancients understood this well. In the temples of initiation, before any higher knowledge was given, the pupil was taught to observe the stirrings of these subtle senses. They learned to notice the moments when a thought arrived without origin, when an image appeared in the mind uncalled, when a sudden feeling of certainty arose without reason. They were taught to hold these moments gently, neither forcing them nor dismissing them, until the faculty behind them began to stir more often, like a sleeper drawn toward waking by the warmth of the sun. You have no need to travel to those temples. The school is within you. Begin by noticing. When you think of someone and they call you, do not shrug it away. When you sense the atmosphere of a place before seeing its details, pause and attend to the sensation. When a dream brings something that later comes to pass, record it and remember. These are not trivialities. They are messages from the part of you that still stands on the other side of the veil. As we move forward, remember this. The echoes are not the gates themselves. They are the whispers that pass through the cracks, telling you the gates still exist. They are not yet the clear seeing of the first races, but they are proof that you have not lost the path entirely. They remind you that your faculties, though sleeping, are not dead. They wait, and they watch, and they answer when you call to them with the language they understand, the language of attention, reverence, and readiness. In the next stage of our journey, we will move from recognizing these echoes to understanding the conditions under which the gates begin to open again. For the faculties will not awaken in chaos. They require a certain harmony, a certain order in the soul. And so, before we can name them, we must prepare the ground in which they will bloom, just as the earth must be tilled before the seed can take root. The gates have not forgotten you. The question is, will you remember them? Chapter 4. The first key of awakening. You have heard the echoes, and perhaps now you begin to recognize them as more than curiosities. They are not random flashes nor tricks of the mind, but the faint glow of a fire long banked under the ashes of time. Yet to stir that fire into flame is not as simple as wishing it so. The gates to the unseen cannot be forced open by the impatient hand, for their hinges turn only when the soul has learned the weight and responsibility of what lies beyond them. This is why the first key of awakening is not a technique, not a ritual, not a secret formula whispered in shadows. It is a state of being, a deliberate shaping of the self into the vessel that can hold without spilling, can see without being blinded, can act without being corrupted. The ancient schools, whether hidden in the temples of Egypt, in the caves of the Himalayas, or in the sanctuaries of vanished continents, understood this truth. Before you can open the inner senses, you must purify the instrument through which they work. The faculties you seek are not separate organs locked away in some corner of the body. They are extensions of your entire being. If your being is disordered, clouded by selfishness, distorted by unexamined desire, the perceptions they offer will be twisted, like light refracted through a warped lens. Purity, in this sense, is not a moral code imposed from outside, but an inner alignment with truth. It means that your thoughts are as clear as a mountain spring, that your motives are free from the restless currents of greed and vanity, that your actions reflect the harmony you wish to perceive. For the gates open inward as well as outward. If you would see clearly beyond the veil, you must first see clearly within yourself. This is why so many who stumble upon fragments of the higher faculties without preparation become lost in delusion. They see a truth, but only through the filter of their own distortions, and so what was pure becomes tangled with error. In the ancient warnings, this was called the danger of the half-opened gate. Better to wait until the door stands ready to swing wide in balance than to peer through a crack and be blinded by what you are not yet able to hold. The first key of awakening, then, begins with self-mastery. This is not a harsh suppression of the self, but the art of knowing its every turn and shadow, so that no movement within you takes you unawares. It is to stand as the silent watchman at the threshold of your own mind, discerning the origins of each thought, each impulse, and shaping them to accord with the higher law. It is to choose consciously what you allow to grow in the soil of your being. For whatever grows, there will shape the quality of your perception. Discipline in this context is not a chain, but a liberation. It frees you from being ruled by passing moods or the sway of external noise. It gathers your scattered forces into a single steady current. And it is in that current that the sleeping faculties find the strength to rise again. Imagine a lake whose surface is constantly stirred by wind. It can reflect nothing clearly. But when the air is still, the depths are revealed, and even the stars above are mirrored without distortion. Your being must become such a lake, clear, still, receptive. The adepts of old would begin a pupil's training not with the mysteries themselves, but with the cultivation of this stillness. Days, months, even years might pass in seemingly simple exercises, observing thoughts without attachment, performing tasks with unwavering attention, restraining the tongue from idle speech, aligning each action with an inner sense of harmony. To the uninitiated, this seemed a needless delay, but those who understood knew that such work was the foundation upon which all true awakening rested. Even now, without temple walls around you, you can begin the same preparation. Attend to the quality of your thoughts as a gardener tends to the quality of the soil. Do not let resentment take root, for it will cloud your inner vision. Do not feed envy, for it will distort the truths that reach you. Cultivate patience, for the gates will open in their own time, and haste will only keep them closed. When you speak, let your words be as deliberate as the craftsman's chisel, each stroke shaping the form you wish to bring forth in the world. This inner work does not make you worthy in the eyes of some external judge. It makes you ready in the structure of your own being. The higher senses are precise instruments, and like any fine instrument, they require tuning. A harp with loose strings will produce only noise. A mind without discipline will produce only confusion when touched by the currents of the unseen. You may ask, why must this be so? Why shouldn't the gates open to anyone who desires them? Because desire alone is not enough. The faculties you seek are not ornaments to be worn for vanity, nor tools for the satisfaction of curiosity. They are channels for truth, truth that is often sharper than a sword, brighter than the sun, heavier than the stone. Without the preparation to bear it, you would be overwhelmed. The first key ensures that when the flood comes, you are not swept away, but can stand and direct its course toward the good. And there is another reason. The gates open in response to harmony. The universe, in its deepest law, moves toward balance. The inner senses are attuned to that law, and they will not respond to a vessel out of tune with it. When you bring your thoughts, your emotions, your actions into alignment with that harmony, you create the resonance that draws the gates to open. It is not a matter of force, but of attunement, just as a note will cause a string to vibrate when it matches its frequency. So begin, not by seeking visions or voices, but by shaping yourself into the clear, balanced instrument through which such perception can flow. Watch your thoughts as you would watch the sky, noting the clouds and the spaces between. Choose your words as you would choose the seeds to plant in a precious garden. Act with the quiet certainty that every gesture shapes the field of your being. In this way, without strain, without the fever of ambition, you will find that the gates begin to sense your approach. When they open, they will not do so with thunder or blinding light. Often, it is a quiet widening, a deepening of your awareness so subtle you may not at first realize what has changed. The world will seem the same, yet you will feel its depth. You will walk through the same streets, yet sense their hidden currents. You will meet the same people, yet glimpse the patterns that shape their lives. This is the beginning, the first sign that the key has turned. In the chapters to come, we will draw nearer to the gates themselves. But know this, without the first key, the others will not turn. Self-mastery is not the end, but it is the door through which all else must pass. And if you walk it faithfully, the faculties that sleep within you will stir, not because you demand it, but because you have become the kind of being to whom they can safely awaken. The path from here leads us to a revelation, the first full unveiling of the hidden faculties themselves. But before they can be named, you must understand their nature, not as curiosities or powers, but as living extensions of the soul's true perception. Only then will you be ready to hear their names and begin the work of awakening each one in its turn. Chapter 5. The Hidden Faculties Revealed. You have walked through the dawn of the first races, felt the slow descent into matter, and heard the faint echoes that still reach you from behind the veil. You have been given the first key, the discipline and inner harmony that prepare the soul for truth. Now, for the first time, we may speak openly of the hidden faculties themselves, the sleeping senses that once shaped the human experience in its fullness. They are not inventions of the imagination, nor the property of a chosen few, but the natural heritage of every human soul, long buried beneath the weight of centuries, awaiting the signal to rise again. When these gates are opened, perception changes not in degree, but in kind. It is as though you have lived your life seeing only the reflection of a mountain in still water, and suddenly you stand before the mountain itself. The world does not vanish, it deepens. It reveals itself as more than substance and shadow. The air between you and another person becomes alive with meaning. A tree ceases to be merely a shape of wood and leaf. It is a living current, a presence whose history and essence are felt as clearly as its form is seen. These are not visions or hallucinations. They are the direct apprehension of reality's fuller dimensions, made possible by the awakening of the faculties that have slept within you since the closing of the gates. The first is the eye of direct knowledge. This is not the physical eye, though it may seem at times to work through it. It is the faculty that perceives truth without mediation, without the long chain of reasoning. When it stirs, you simply know, not as an opinion, not as a hope, but with the same certainty that you know the sun has risen when you stand in its light. The ancients guarded this faculty most closely, for it sees beyond deception, beyond appearances, beyond the masks that beings wear. In ages past, it was the normal vision of humanity. Now, it returns only in flashes to those prepared to bear it without distortion. The second is the ear of the inner sound. The physical ear hears the vibrations of air. The inner ear hears the vibrations of life itself. When awakened, it can discern the subtle tones in a person's voice that reveal their hidden state, the harmonies or discords in a place that tell of its history, the faint, steady note that underlies all creation. In the temples, pupils were trained to hear the music of the spheres, the symphony of forces in perfect law, for to hear it was to know the nature of the whole. The third is the sense of vibration. This faculty feels the life force that flows through beings and objects. It is the touch that reaches beyond the skin, the perception of the pulse of things. Through it, one may hold an object and feel the echo of its past, the imprint of those who have touched it, the events that have shaped its presence. In times when the gates were open, this sense allowed healers to diagnose the inner state of the body without a single word from the patient, for the imbalance of forces was as clear to them as a storm in the sky. The fourth is the voice of thought. This is the true telepathy, the direct reception of thought from one mind to another without the use of words or signs. In the first races, it was the universal language. In the far future, it will be so again. When awakened, it does not merely hear the content of another's thought, but receives it in its fullness, with all the feeling and intention that shape it. It is a faculty that demands great integrity, for in the hands of the unprepared, it becomes intrusion, and thus it remains sealed until the soul has learned reverence for the sanctity of the inner world. The fifth is the sense of presence. This is the perception of being beyond the reach of the physical senses. It is the sudden certainty that someone stands behind you when no footstep has sounded. The awareness of an unseen watcher in an empty room. The recognition of a presence in meditation or in the borderlands of sleep. In its highest form, it perceives the presence of non-physical beings, those who dwell in realms adjacent to the physical, unseen by the outer eye, but part of the great tapestry of existence. These five are not separate, like instruments each playing alone, but parts of one greater instrument, the full symphony of perception. When the gates are open, they work together, each enriching the other, until the boundary between the seen and the unseen dissolves into a single unified awareness. Yet they are given here not as curiosities to catalogue, but as living realities to prepare for. Each of them can be imitated by trickery. Each can be counterfeited by the restless imagination. The mark of their true awakening is not the thrill of novelty, but the quiet certainty of truth, the calm expansion of understanding, the deepening of compassion. For when you see more, you feel more. When you feel more, you are called to act with greater care. The ancients taught that the awakening of these faculties is not the end of the path, but the beginning of a greater work. They are not prizes, but tools for perceiving the laws that govern life, for discerning the currents that shape events, for serving the harmony of the whole. To misuse them is to invite their withdrawal. To use them well is to draw them closer until they become as natural to you as your heartbeat. Do not imagine that they will appear all at once, or that the moment they stir, you will be transformed beyond recognition. Their awakening is gradual, like the slow brightening of the sky before dawn. You may find one faculty stirring before the others, a single gate opening slightly while the rest remain closed. This is as it should be, for each faculty requires its own discipline, its own alignment, before it can be trusted to serve the truth rather than the illusions of the self. You now know their names and their nature. The journey ahead will be to create the conditions in which they can awaken fully and in harmony. For the half-awakened faculty is like a flame in the wind, brilliant for a moment, but easily extinguished. The work is not to chase the faculties themselves, but to shape yourself into the being for whom their presence is natural. In the next chapter, we will walk the path of the adept, the one who has dedicated their life to that shaping. You will see how the ancient schools trained their pupils, not by handing them powers, but by forging them into the vessels that could hold those powers without spilling them into harm. And you will learn how, even without the walls of a temple, you can begin that same work, step by deliberate step, until the gates to the unseen stand open before you, and the sleeping senses awaken to the light they have long awaited. Chapter 6. The Path of the Adept. You now know the names and natures of the hidden faculties, but knowledge alone will not open the gates. The ancients were clear on this. The higher senses are not given to those who merely desire them. They awaken in those who have prepared themselves to receive them without corruption. This preparation is what we call the path of the adept. It is not a path of sudden revelations and effortless visions, but a long, deliberate shaping of the entire being until it becomes the vessel through which truth can flow unimpeded. To walk this path is to live as if the faculties were already awake, to hold yourself to the standard they would require. For when the eye of direct knowledge opens, it will show you truths that may unsettle the comfortable illusions by which others live. When the ear of the inner sound stirs, you will hear not only harmonies, but also the discord that lies beneath the polished surfaces of human speech. When the sense of vibration awakens, you will feel the wounds in people and places as if they were your own. The voice of thought will reveal what is hidden, and the sense of presence will draw you into contact with beings whose natures may test the depth of your courage and discernment. This is why the adept is not simply a possessor of powers, but a guardian of them. Without discipline, the faculties can become burdens. Without purity, they can become instruments of harm. The preparation for their awakening is not ornamental, it is essential. The first discipline is mastery over thought. This does not mean the suppression of all thinking, but the ability to hold thought as one holds a sword, to wield it with precision without allowing it to wander aimlessly or cut where it should not. In the training halls of the temples, pupils were often given tasks that seemed trivial, focusing on a single symbol for hours without allowing the mind to drift, or holding a single pure thought in the presence of noise and distraction. The untrained mind resists such exercises, for it is accustomed to running where it will. But the faculties you seek are delicate instruments, and they cannot work through a mind that trembles with every gust of impulse. The second discipline is mastery over speech. Words are not only sounds, they are forces. Each word carries a vibration that shapes the field around you and the minds of those who hear it. The adept speaks with precision and restraint, knowing that idle or careless speech is like scattering seeds without regard for what they will grow. In the old schools, students might pass weeks in silence, learning to listen before they spoke, to measure the weight of a word before letting it fall into the world. To speak truth is not simply to tell facts, but to align speech with the harmony of the whole, so that what you utter strengthens the structure of reality rather than distorting it. The third discipline is mastery over action. Every gesture, every choice, every step leaves an imprint. The adept acts as though every movement will echo through the corridors of the unseen world, for indeed it does. This is why the ancient training often involved manual tasks, tending gardens, preparing food, and crafting tools. These were not distractions from spiritual work, but the work itself, for in the act of doing with attention and care, the will is trained to govern the body as the mind governs thought. The fourth discipline is mastery over desire. Desire, left unexamined, is the root of distortion. The faculties are drawn toward purity of motive, for they will magnify whatever they find. If they awaken in a heart driven by pride, they will serve pride. If they awaken in a mind driven by greed, they will serve greed. The adept learns to trace each desire to its source, to question whether it arises from the hunger of the lower self or the call of the higher. This is not the destruction of desire, but its transmutation, turning the raw force of wanting into the steady flame of purpose. The fifth discipline is the cultivation of stillness. In a world that demands constant movement, stillness is both rare and powerful. It is in stillness that the deeper currents can be felt, the subtle impressions perceived. The adept learns to be still in body, still in mind, still in heart, until the ripples of restlessness fade and the inner waters reflect truth without distortion. This stillness is not passivity. It is readiness, the poised awareness of one who waits for the right moment to act. The path also demands vigilance, for not all that comes through the gates is benevolent. Just as the physical senses can be deceived, so can the higher faculties be clouded by illusion. The adept learns to test every perception against the measure of inner harmony, to discern whether it springs from truth or from the echo of their own shadow. This is why the training is not only about opening the gates, but about guarding them. To perceive is one thing, to interpret truly is another. Though the temples of the ancient world have fallen into dust, the training of the adept remains possible. It requires no outer initiation, no secret order, no appointed master. It requires that you become your own temple, your own sanctuary, your own initiator. You may not wear the robe of the disciple, but you can live by the same principles. In each thought you choose, each word you speak, each action you take, you are shaping the channel through which the higher faculties will awaken. At first, the path may feel lonely, for few will understand why you choose silence over noise, precision over haste, stillness over constant movement. Yet the adept is never truly alone. For the moment you commit to this shaping, you align yourself with the great current of all who have walked it before. In dreams, in moments of deep meditation, in the quiet certainty that you are not working in vain, you will sense their presence, those unseen allies whose work is to guard the ancient gates until humanity is ready to walk through them again. The adept's way is not about seeking experiences for their own sake, but about becoming the kind of being for whom such experiences are a natural unfolding. Powers sought for power's sake will slip through your grasp like water through a clenched fist. But if you walk steadily, with discipline, humility, and a will aligned to the greater harmony, the gates will open without strain, and the faculties will awaken not as intrusions, but as the rightful return of what has always been yours. From here, we must look forward. For the adept does not train only for their own awakening, but for the service of the whole. In the next chapter, we will step into the vision of what humanity can become. The sixth and seventh race is yet to come, when the gates will stand open for all, and the hidden senses will be the common inheritance of a world transformed. Chapter 7. The Future of Humanity's Senses. The path of the adept is an individual journey, but it is also the seed of a far greater unfolding. For the faculties you awaken within yourself are not meant to remain rare, nor to be the treasures of a small brotherhood hidden in shadows. They are the birthright of humanity, and though they sleep now in the majority, there will come an age when they will open in all. This age lies ahead, not in myth, but in the long arc of evolution, in the dawning of the 6th and 7th races, whose forms and minds will be as different from ours as ours are from the luminous beings of the first age. Imagine a world in which the eye of direct knowledge is not a rare gift, but the universal mode of perception. Deception would wither in such a world, for the lie would be felt before it was spoken, the hidden motive discerned before it could take shape. Contracts, treaties, and promises would not be enforced by law, but by the simple impossibility of concealing falsehood. Trust would not be a gamble, but the natural state of beings who see the truth in one another as clearly as they see the light of the sun. In that time, the ear of the inner sound will hear the harmonies that bind all life, and humanity will live in conscious accord with them. The dissonance that now scars the world, the noise of greed, the clamor of conflict, will be unbearable to such ears, and so it will fade, for it will find no one willing to sustain it. Music will no longer be entertainment alone, but a form of healing, a way of aligning the soul with the great chords of creation. Every city, every dwelling will be tuned as one might tune an instrument, so that its very atmosphere nourishes the spirit. The sense of vibration will make it impossible to ignore the suffering of others, for it will be felt as keenly as one's own. The wound of a stranger will be as tangible as a cut on one's own skin. No child will go hungry, for the pang of their hunger will echo in the heart of all who pass. No cruelty will go unheeded, for its vibration will stir every conscience until it is answered. Healing will no longer be the domain of specialists alone. It will be the responsibility of all, for all will feel the imbalance and know how to restore it. The voice of thought will render speech almost unnecessary. Communication will be as swift as the movement of thought itself, rich with nuance, impossible to misunderstand. Cultures will not be divided by language, for understanding will bypass the fragile symbols of words. The ancient dream of unity will no longer be a hope, but a lived reality, for when you can hear the heart of another directly, divisions born of ignorance dissolve like mist in the morning sun. And the sense of presence will make solitude a different thing entirely. To be alone will not mean to be isolated, for the presence of allies, mentors, and companions in the unseen worlds will be as clear as the presence of those standing before you. Death will lose its sting, for the departed will not vanish into mystery. They will remain as tangible presences, continuing their part in the great work from other planes. Fear of the unknown will give way to reverence for the infinite, for the boundaries between worlds will be known as thresholds, not walls. In such an age, governance will not be the rule of the clever over the many, but the stewardship of the wise for the benefit of all. Decisions will be made not through argument and compromise, but through shared perception of what is needed, felt, and seen by all. Conflict will not vanish entirely, for difference of perspective is part of creation's richness, but it will no longer breed hatred or division, for the underlying unity will never be in question. The 6th race will be the bridge, the age of conscious transition. Its people will still bear the legacy of the material focus of the 5th race, but they will turn their gaze inward as well as outward. The faculties will awaken in greater numbers, and humanity will begin to see itself not as the owner of the earth, but as its steward, bound by sacred trust to the life it sustains. Science will merge with the higher perception. exploring not only the physical laws of matter, but the subtle laws of energy and consciousness. Technology will no longer be a tool for conquest, but a means of amplifying harmony. The seventh race will be the flowering. In them, the faculties will be fully awake from birth, and the physical form itself will be shaped by this awareness. It will be lighter, more refined, responsive to thought in ways we now find difficult to imagine. Distance will lose much of its meaning, for thought and perception will traverse it in an instant. Communities will not be bound by geography, but by resonance, groups forming and dissolving fluidly as the needs of the whole shift. The earth itself will be different, for as humanity evolves, so does the planet. The veil will lift not only for individuals, but for the entire living sphere. Yet these visions are not given to make you wait for a distant future. They are given so that you may understand the magnitude of what stirs within you now. The faculties you awaken in yourself are the seeds of that coming age. Every act of discipline, every moment of stillness, every choice to align with truth rather than illusion is part of building the bridge to the future. The adepts' work is not for themselves alone, but for the unfolding of humanity's next form. And make no mistake, the future is shaped in the present. The gates will not swing open for the whole of humanity in a single night. They will open in the quiet victories of individual souls, in the unseen efforts of those who choose to live as if the higher senses were already awake. The sixth and seventh races will be born from such lives, their capacities drawn forth by the pattern we set now. When you align yourself with this vision, you join the current that flows toward it. The unseen world begins to respond, for it recognizes in you the resonance of what is to come. You become not only a student of the ancient wisdom, but a co-creator of humanity's destiny. In the conclusion of our journey, we will turn from the vast sweep of evolution to the most intimate horizon, your own path, here and now. For the gates to the unseen do not open in the abstract. They open in the life you live, in the thoughts you tend, in the love you embody. And once they open, the world will never be the same again. Conclusion. The listener's great work. You have walked the ancient road with me, through the luminous dawn of the first races, into the shadowed descent where the gates began to close, through the muffled whispers of the faculties in your own life, to the first key of awakening, to the revelation of the hidden senses themselves, to the disciplined path of the adept, and into the vision of the humanity yet to come. This journey has not been about gathering curiosities, nor about collecting stories from a vanished past. It has been about you, about the being you are now, and the being you can become. For all that we have spoken of, the eye of direct knowledge, the ear of the inner sound, the sense of vibration, the voice of thought, the sense of presence, is not waiting in some far-off realm. It is here, folded within you, like seeds lying in the dark earth, patient but not passive. They wait for the right season, the right conditions, the right call. And you, by your thought, your discipline, your choices, are the gardener who will decide whether they remain dormant or rise into the light. Do not think the work is too great or the path too long. The gates do not swing open for those who merely wish, but for those who live as if they were already on the other side. Begin where you are. Attend to the quality of your thoughts. Make them instruments of clarity rather than confusion. Speak as though each word were a stone laid in the foundation of a temple. Deliberate, steady, worthy of bearing weight. Act with the awareness that each gesture ripples through the seen and the unseen alike. There will be days when nothing seems to move, when the veil feels as dense as ever, when the faculties seem silent. This is part of the work. Seeds germinate in darkness. Rivers carve stone over centuries. The unseen progress is no less real for being invisible. In such moments, remember that the adepts of old walked years in preparation for a single glimpse beyond the veil. And when it came, it was enough to sustain them for a lifetime. You are no different in essence from them. The same laws, the same gates, the same faculties live within you. And understand this, the awakening is not for your satisfaction alone. The faculties are given so that you may see truth where others see illusion, hear harmony where others hear noise, feel the hidden pain that calls for healing, speak thought to thought without barrier, and stand in the presence of worlds yet unseen. These are tools for service. If you use them only to magnify the self, they will close as surely as they opened, but if you use them to serve the whole, they will deepen with every act. The great work of the listener, your great work, is to live as a bridge between what humanity is and what it is becoming. Every time you choose truth over falsehood, harmony over discord, compassion over indifference, you help to anchor the future in the present. You help to draw the sixth and seventh races nearer, not as some distant prophecy, but as the living possibility unfolding through your own choices. Perhaps you think yourself too small to shape the destiny of the human race. Yet the future is nothing more than the sum of countless present moments, and the smallest act aligned with truth can send its influence far beyond your sight. You do not know which gesture, which word, which choice will be the one that tips the balance for another soul. But the gates know, and they respond to such work. So take this journey with you now, not as a story to be remembered, but as a path to be walked. Let the idea of the gates become a living presence in your days. When you wake, ask yourself, how will I live today so that the gates within me may open a little more? When you rest, look back and ask, did I speak, think, and act in a way that strengthens the vessel for what is to come? Let these questions be your companions, and the answers will shape you more surely than any ritual or secret. The unseen world is not a far country. It is the deeper layer of this one. The gates do not lead you away from life, but into its fuller reality. When they open, you will find that you have not stepped into another place, but that the place you have always been has revealed its true face at last. And when that day comes, you will understand why the journey took as long as it did, why the preparation was so exacting, why the first key had to be turned before any other. Because astonishment is not the only reason the gates open. They open to allow you to exist as a conscious participant in the grand symphony, seeing with an unblinking eye, hearing with an unmuted ear, and feeling with a touch that senses the life pulse of everything. The faculties that slept for so long were never lost. They were just waiting for you to remember them. You will know that the road was worthwhile when you walk in that awareness. The work is before you now. The gates stand ready. The unseen is not far. The only question that remains is this: will you live as the being you truly are, or as the shadow the world has taught you to be? The answer to that question is the key that will decide whether the gates open in your lifetime or remain closed until another age. Choose with care, choose with courage, choose with the knowledge that the moment you do, the journey through the gates to the unseen has already begun.